This is the first Sikha in Parshas Vayetzei, and Chelik Tesvav of Likud Sichas. The Kesher mit dem Eibishnes Brocha zu Yankiv Avinu Faratz the Yom HaVekeinu V'Tzafeinu V'Negbo. In connection to the Hashem's Brocha, Hashem's blessing to Yankiv Avinu, where he said the Faratz means you will spread out or you will be strong. Yom HaVekeinu V'Tzafeinu V'Negbo is all four sides of the world. Zog Chazal, the Chazal say, the Chachamim tell us, they connected to this pasuk that Kol HaMa'anek is a Shabbos, anybody who makes Shabbos pleasure, in other words, has pleasure from Shabbos, Neisen Leinachlo Limitzorim. You give him means the Eibishter gives him an inheritance without any borders, without any limits. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, Osti Saneg al Hashem, Gamer, you will have pleasure on Hashem, and the pleasure, the real pleasure that we talk about is Shabbos. So the pasuk continues there. It's a pasuk in Yeshaya. The pasuk says, I will make you eat, I will give you the inheritance of Yankiv. So the pasuk tells that if you have Taining Shabbos, you will get the special inheritance that Hashem gave to Yaakov Avinu. What's the inheritance to Yaakov? So it says, Leiki Avraham, not like by Avraham, where Hashem said, you shall go in the land, length and breadth, and that I'll give you. So Hashem is giving him a limited thing. Like a Yitzchak, not by Yitzchak, Hashem says, I will give your children these lands, which means that it's Israel. So by Avram, by Yitzchak, Hashem promised a limited thing. He's giving a land which is limited. So the pasuk says, no, if you have Tainik from Shabbos, I'll give you the inheritance of Yaakov. Elok Yaakov, like Yaakov, Shekosu Bei. By Yaakov it says, Ufaratz Yom HaVekeinu Tzafeinu V'Negbo. Not only you will be to all the four corners, Ufaratz, you will be strong, you will break through the border, break through the barriers. The pasuk says, I'll give you everything. So that's what the pasuk says, that if you have Tainag al Hashem, Osti Tainag al Hashem, I'll give you the Nachal of Yankiv, which is the Lachla of Ufaratsta, which is Bligvul. Hashem will give you a bracha without any mitzarim, as it says, without any limitation. As is Yedua, the Rebbe says, we know, Aschar mitzvah is midah connected midah. When Hashem gives reward for a mitzvah, it's measure for measure, which means the reward has some connection to the thing that you do to get the reward. In other words, if you do something, the reward will be along the lines of what you did. So based on that, we have to understand. What is the mitzvah from Einik Shabbos? Why is the mitzvah of Shabbos, and especially here we're talking about the Einik, the pleasure of Shabbos, in a pchina from Bli Mitzorim, is in a pchina in a level of Bli Gvul, of infinity, was the faris Eich Yischar Anach Bli Mitzorim. Therefore, the reward is an inheritance without any limits. If he's giving you a reward of Bli Mitzorim for Shabbos, for keeping Shabbos, or for having pleasure from Shabbos, it means the Shabbos also has a shaykhus to Bli Mitzorim. That's why the reward of Bli Mitzorim. But the question is, what's the connection of Shabbos to Bli Mitzorim, that the reward will be Bli Mitzorim? You will get Bli Gvul, an infinite level of schar. Now the Rebbe continues even more. See, so far we're talking about the Yidden, not about Yaakov Avinu himself. It says in the Chazal say that if a Yid is Ma'anik as HaShabbos, he will get a Nachla of Yaakov. What the Rebbe is going to do now is going to show that by Yaakov himself, we find the connection between Shabbos and the brocha of Ufaratz to Yom HaVekeinu Tzafeinu V'Negbo, that it'll be Bli Mitzorim. What that means is that the schar for Shmira Shabbos is the brocha of Ufaratz to Nachla Bli Mitzorim. This thing that we said, that the reward for keeping Shabbos is the brocha of Ufaratz to, which is a Nachla Bli Mitzorim, which is inheritance without any borders, without any limitations. We find it concerning Yaakov himself, not only a bracha for the children, for the Yidden. Chazal tell us, Avraham she'ein kosev be'shmira Shabbos, yorash ha'sa'elam b'midah. Avraham Avinu, that doesn't say in the Torah that he kept Shabbos, so he yarshened the world, or another Gersador, so what he yarshened, what he inherited, is b'midah. It's something with a measurement, the limit. Like it says, Hashem told Avraham, go walk in the land, the length and the breadth, and I will give you that land. So it's a limited thing. Yaakov, who by him it does say that he kept Shabbos. It says in the Torah that he kept Shabbos. It says that when he came to Shechem, it says he rested by the beginning of the city. That means the Chazal say what it means. He came to that area right before the Shkia, The Kovat Tchumim B'Yem, and before it got dark already, he made it Tchum because you're not allowed to walk outside of the Tchum. Tchum is a border of amount of space that you're allowed to walk on Shabbos outside of the city. But you could only designate the extra space that you want before Shabbos. So he did it. Before the Shkia, he managed to designate the Tchumim of the area before it got Shabbos. So we see from here that where the Torah is telling us that he kept Shabbos. So because of that, he inherited the world, or like the other gives of the Oris, he inherited the land without a limitation, without a measurement. Shenemar, and the Medrash calls the posik, etc. That means that the Tzufaratsto is border without any borders. So here we see that even by Yankov himself, we find that the reason he got the bracha of Tzufaratsto because the Torah mentions that he kept Shabbos. Now, what does it mean that the Torah mentions by Yaakov and by Avram not? Does that mean that Avram did not keep Shabbos? The Rebbe explains it. Before Shem explain, the Taich from the Wert that Avram Shein Kosev Ishmir Shabbos. The meaning of those words that it says in the Medrash, Avram, where it doesn't say by him keeping Shabbos, is not as Esved Bechlali the Mountain Torah as he keeps the Shabbos. It doesn't mean that the Torah doesn't mention it all, doesn't tell us that he kept Shabbos. It says by Avram that he kept my mishmeres, which means my laws. Chazal say, what does it mean? That Avram knew even the halachas of Eruv Chatzeres. Eruv Chatzeres has to do with Shabbos. So the Torah does tell us that he kept Shabbos based on these words. Now, what does it mean that the Torah doesn't tell us that Avram kept Shabbos? Nor as a Svetnit Yizog Befeirish. It doesn't say clearly Shabbos, or it doesn't even say in detail. It says kept all the mitzvahs, which was Shabbos is one of them, and he kept even he kept every detail of Shabbos. But the Torah doesn't say in detail specifically Shabbos and in detail. Torah generally says Arangishlos, and it's included in all the mitzvahs from the Torah Kula, all the mitzvahs of the Torah, that he kept all the mitzvahs, which automatically include Shabbos also. Schenke by Yankim, state by der Prat, as er gehit mitzvah Shabbos. Yankim, it says in detail. Specifically, it says like Yichan that he came to in front of before the city right before Shabbos, and he did what you're supposed to do for Shabbos. So the Torah specifically talks by Yaakov that he kept Shabbos. Gebald die mitzvah from Shmira Shabbos wird in the Torah untergesprochen by Yaakov and not by Avram. And since this idea that he kept Shabbos is stressed in the Torah specifically by Yaakov, not by Avram, it does Gufa Abavai, it says by Yaakov is the key mitzvah Shabbos going to till from under the mitzvah. So that shows that by Yaakov, when he kept Shabbos, it was different than he kept all the mitzvahs. By Avram, he kept Shabbos, but it's connected, included with all the mitzvahs. So he kept Shabbos the same way he kept all the mitzvahs. By Yaakov, since the Torah specifically mentioned Shabbos, shows that he kept it differently than the other mitzvahs. And because of that special way that he kept Shabbos, obviously, is ein key mitzvah Shabbos, in the way he kept Shabbos. So he was zeicha to Faratzta because he kept Shabbos specially. It's not only because the Torah mentions it, because why does the Torah mention it specifically? Because he kept it in a specific, better way. So keeping Shabbos special is the reason why you got the bracha of Faratzta. That's one thing, comes out. In addition to that, we have to say something else. From this fact, that out of all the details of Shabbos, of mitzvah Shabbos that Yaakov kept, the Torah just mentions specifically one detail of Shabbos. Not only it mentions Shabbos specifically, not amongst all the mitzvahs. In Shabbos Gufa, it mentions the mitzvah that the inyan of Shabbos that he did is the made chumin. Is verstanden, from that we understand. As Chodj the bracha for Ratzto, the Shaychas to Shmira Shabbos in Algemein, that even though the bracha for Ratzto has a connection to general keeping of Shabbos, Kilosh Chazal Yaakov Shekosav Shmira Shabbos, like the Lashon of Chazal, that why did Yaakov get the bracha for Ratzto? Because by him is written Shabbos. It doesn't say by him is written Chumin Shabbos. So Mele, it shows that the reason he got this bracha is because he had kept Shabbos, and obviously in a special way. That's what the Torah makes it special. But deswegen hat sie a besondere Scheiche zum Inyan of Tchumen. Must be that the bracha of Ratzta is specifically connection to the mitzvah Inyan of Tchumen and Shabbos, the borders of Shabbos that you have to make for yourself. Border. That's the mitzvah. The specialty of Shabbos was in the mitzvah of Tchumen. In andere Werte, in other words, it means like this. Or this spezielle Meile in Ki Mitzvah Shabbos, mit welcher Yaakov hat sich ausgezeichnet, the special Meile of keeping the mitzvah of Shabbos that Yaakov was special in, hat sich ausgedrückt, b'miyuchad in dem Kiyum von dem Inyan of Tchumen, was specifically expressed in keeping the Inyan of Tchumen. So Tchumen is the specialty of Shabbos by Yaakov Avinu, and for that reason, He got the bracha b'faratz. So now, after we know all this information, now we have to understand. Number one, what was the thing that happened? That there was a special mile by Yaakov keeping the mitzvah of Shabbos, the way Avraham Avinu kept the mitzvah of Shabbos. Was to live them, and because of the special of Yank, that's why it's mentioned on the Bayank. Was the Farat given to Birchas. That's why the Zeich. So what's so special about Yaakov's way of keeping Shabbos? It doesn't say what he did. So there must be something special that he did Shabbos different than Avraham, for instance, kept Shabbos. And in which way is the difference? And in the Tchumin, that's going to be the second thing. So something special by Avraham, by Yaakov over Avraham, and that specialty brought to Faratzta. What's so special of that special thing that he did, that should deserve the bracha of Faratzta? And there's the second thing, whatever the smile is specifically by Tchumin. Why, how, in which way does it express itself by Tchumin? So the Rebbe says, we'll understand this. First, bring the Yin was the Mittel, das was the Mittel Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe, who is the one that we celebrate his Geula on Yud Kislev. In the order, it says that this was the day that Rebbe said this Maimed, the Sicher. This is actually from Maimed. So the Mittel Rebbe writes, in Mavayin in Zayn Maimed Ata Echad, in the famous Maimed that he said, Ata Echad. So there he explains in Chilik zwischen the mitzvah and Shabbos and andere mitzvahs, the difference between the mitzvah of Shabbos and other mitzvahs. He explains it like this. Andere mitzvahs, other mitzvahs, how do you fulfill a mitzvah, all the mitzvahs? By doing something. Wenn doch looking zwischen the Meif and Kima mitzvahs, durch Tzadikim Teilim, and the Meif Nakim durch Anoshim Shutim. So there's a difference in how a tzaddikim do it, and how a simple person does it. Tzaddikim Teilim, but they are nochas film, keneged aleva arosh l'moshel. By tzaddikim, for instance, big tzaddikim, when they put on film, on the hand, which is by the heart, and on the head, for instance, their head, which really means the brain, the intellect, is much higher. Their heart is much higher than by a regular person. The mele, the mitzvah film that they're doing is in a higher level. On the other hand, the simple people don't have that high level, so their kiyama mitzvah, they're doing the mitzvah film, is not the same level. Now, there is a andere mitzvah, same by other mitzvah. Any mitzvah that you do a mitzvah, you do it, that tzaddik does it with deeper kavanah, more. So there's a difference between the levels of Yidden. Again, the mitzvah of Shmira Shabbos, on the other hand, the mitzvah of keeping Shabbos. How do you keep Shabbos? Was by state from Menuche und Shvise von Yon. The mitzvah of keeping Shabbos is not doing, is resting, not doing anything, keeping away from work. In the heder, in the not doing, heder means not. In the not, how do you fulfill the mitzvah by not doing? You talk in Unterschied zwischen ein need, not zweiten. There's no difference one need and another. In not doing, everyone is the same. When you do something, you can do it in a different way. But when not doing, you sit back and you don't do. Everyone sits back the same way and doesn't do. Even though from what the people rest is different. Simple people rest from work, from simple work. On the other hand, those that rest, those that worked on the Mishkan, for instance, and now they're resting. So they're resting from something special. In Melechas HaMishkan, they're resting from working of the Mishkan. So there is a difference between people who are all week doing great things. So they're resting from those great things. Simple people are resting from simple things. There's another thing. So another thing why there should be a difference, that during the week, there's Avodas HaBirurim. You have to, when you eat, you have to be Mavarer, you have to eat the Shem Shemaim and elevate the food. With Shabbos, you don't have to work because Shabbos is holy to begin with. So there's a different, we can look at it, there's a different, we're resting from something, and there's a difference from what you're resting. He says, Blaze Achilik in the Inyonim from Welchem Yeshevet. The difference is from what you rest. Aber in Inyan und Etzem Ashvire, but in the fact that you're resting, Seinen Hakel Shovim Mamish. You're all the same. Und durch dem, was ist Mekayim Bishleim is the Shvise Menucha. And when the person fulfills the mitzvah of resting on Shabbos, It says, how should you rest? How could a person, even if you have all kinds of worries and things like that, but comes to Shabbos, all the worries are off as if everything is solved, etc., etc. And he rests for that. From that he rests. Shabbos, and he rests and he does pleasure of Shabbos from that. He's a mitmahara klal b'asaka, so he doesn't think about his business at all. He's elo godel mazeh. There's nothing, no greater pleasure for the Yid, for the Eibishter, than resting from everything. But here, all the people are the same. All the Yidden are from Kayim, the mitzvah of resting in Shabbos, the same way. While when you do a mitzvah, each one does it differently. Now, it's important to, I won't read it inside, but to learn how to order a 17th star. In order 17th star, the Rebbe asks a shaila. Why do we say this is something special by Shabbos? And on Shabbos, since it's resting, it's not doing, in not doing, everyone is the same. It's by every leisus, every negative commandment. When the Torah says, don't eat, let's say, paper food. In the not eating, they're all the same. We all not eat the same, whether it's a tzaddik or a simple person, they're not as the same. So it's not something special Shabbos. The Rebbe is trying to bring out that this is something special by Shabbos. That's going to lead up to why Shabbos is so special with Gvul, etc., etc. So the Rebbe asks the Shaila, L'chura is by every mitzvah leisus. And the Rebbe says it's not true. In one way, it's all by all leisus is that when you stop doing something and we tell you don't do, everyone doesn't do the same way. When you don't do it, no difference which person it is and which level you are, you don't do it the same way. But the Rebbe said by every leisus, the inyan is not the not doing. Avada, it's inyan, don't do it. So he gives an example. For instance, don't worship Vayetzei. So the not doing is connected to a specific thing. It's don't do Avodah Zarah. So there is a concept of Avodah Zarah. The concept of the way Loshni says is understanding Avodah Zarah, bowing down to Avodah Zarah. When it says don't do it, it's not something just say stay back and don't do anything. Don't do this specific thing. Any mitzvah, shatnez. Don't wear shatnez. So the not doing is an expression of the mitzvah of shatnez. And since in the mitzvah of shatnez there's a difference how you fulfill that concept of the mitzvah, so there is a difference between one person and another, because, or from one mitzvah and another, because the whole mitzvah of the not doing is not doing this specific thing. Shabbos, it's not don't do a specific thing, don't do anything. In other words, I'll put it in different words. The Rebbe doesn't say these words, I'll put it in different words. By other leisus, negative commandments, the mitzvah is don't do, which means the mitzvah is they're not doing that specific thing that the Torah doesn't want you to do. By Shabbos, it's the rest for itself. It's like as if saying there's a positive union in resting. It's not the not doing the malacha. The whole purpose of not doing malacha on Shabbos, not working, the Rebbe quotes the posik, "Sasako malacha, ki why bayona vayemashri," because if it's arrested. So the not doing malacha is a result of the resting. By the other things, the result of not doing whatever it is a result of the thing. Eating chometz HaPesach, there's a concept of chometz, and it's bad. There's all kinds of ideas behind being bad. So when you don't eat chometz, the reason why you're not doing it is because chometz is bad, and that's why you shouldn't do it. So here there's differences how much you feel the isur of chometz. But by Shabbos, it's the opposite. Why don't you do malacha? Because the Torah wants you to rest. There's the mitzvah of resting on its own. Now, resting on its own, they're all the same. There's a difference what you're resting from. But if the isur would be, the din would be, you have to rest from this and from this and from this, you could say, well, the same thing, by the thing that you're resting from is different by other people, different than which Avedas it is. But here, that's the opposite. Why is it that the Torah says don't do any malacha? Because it wants you to rest. So the mitzvah is just the resting. And resting is something that everyone's the same. Not doing, the mitzvah is not doing. It's not the mitzvah, don't do this specific thing. Don't do. From Mele, don't do this, don't do that, don't do any malacha. That's basically what the Rebbe is saying. So the bottom line is that the mitzvah of Shmira Shabbos is something equal by everybody. The time for was alle seine gleichen the mitzvah of Shabbos. What's like the reason why this is a mitzvah that everyone is equal? Is the mitzvah Rebbe Mavai. The mitzvah Rebbe explains. Weil the ikar mitzvah von Shabbos is nuchas hanefesh ba'atzmusa b'chines yichidus shel mayim chitagil u'meicholet. The mitzvah of resting on Shabbos is connected to the etzem neshama, to the essence of the person's neshama. The yichida, which is higher than gilu b'meicholet. Every person has we call the keches hagluyim, the revealed keches, the ability to think, the ability to understand, the ability to see, the ability to feel, heart, the meach. Everyone, you have all these keches. These are details of the person. But The source of everything is the nefesh itself, the Yechida Sheba Nefesh. And the mitzvah of resting on Shabbos is connected to the etzem of the neshama. Das heißt, that means the mitzvah from Shabbos is verbunden mit etzem nefesh. The mitzvah of resting on Shabbos, of keeping Shabbos, connected to the essence of the neshama, because it's Yechida Sheba Nefesh Yechida. Now, and we know that Yechida represents the etzem. The Medrash says Chamisha Shemes Nikra. The neshama has 5 names, which means 5 levels: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. And Yechida is from the word Yochid. That's the essence. Like we say in the Shainis Yechida LeYachdoch, is the verbunden, connected to the Yichud, the essence of the Eibishter. So Shabbos, when you keep Shabbos, that's an expression that has to do with the etzem of a Yid. That's what in the mitzvah of Shabbos, not every mitzvah is like that. The mitzvah of Shabbos is connected to from the etzem of the Yid with the etzem of the Eibishter, and that's where the mitzvah of Shabbos comes from. The Farzal in the Torah them kein Chilukin zwischen ein Yid und zweiten. That's why there's no difference between one Yid and another. Like we said, by keeping Shabbos, they're all the same. Weil unter Pchine von Yechida sind alle Yidden gleich. Because in Yechida, everyone is the same. In the other levels of the neshama is different. One person is smarter. Some parts of the neshama represent the seichel, some parts other things. Everyone is different in his own. There's one atzim is the essential thing that in every yid has, that's the etzem and neshama, and in that everyone is equal. From the godel shebekdelim, these poshet shebepshutim, from the greatest to the smaller to the simplest, it's all the same. Why is it all the same? Because if it has to do with etzem, and the etzem, the yechida, is all the same by everybody. So the Mitler Rebbe explains that the union of Shabbos represents the etzem connection of a Yid to the Eibishter, which is connected to etzem and neshama. Leib them, based on this, is the Mitler Rebbe Mavayed, das was mezogen in the tefillah of Mincha Shabbos. Based on this, the Mitler Rebbe explained when we say Mincha, the Mishneser of Mincha and Shabbos, we say Ki me'itcho him and the because from you comes their rest. Who's the you? You is the etzem of the Eibishter, comes their rest. And through their resting, they bring a Kiddush Hashem. And he explains this is what it means. Menucha Shabbos is me'it chomamish. The menucha, the resting on Shabbos, is from you. That's connected to the etzem of the Eibishter, from Atzmusay Umahusay Yisborach, the essence of the Eibishter. And the far is the menucha, eich by Eden, verbunden mit etzem and nefesh mamish. Since Shabbos comes from the etzem of the Eibishter, and when it comes to the Eden, it's connected to the etzem of the Eden, which is the B'chidas Yechida. So that's the pshat in the first words. Kimi itcha, him and the chasam. Itcha means from you. It doesn't say me Hashem, me Avaye, which is a specific darge. Just from you, which is the etzem. And then we continue, v'almon the chasam yagdish yashmecha. And through this resting, they make your name holy, they mekadesh Hashem. That means, what's Kiddush Hashem? Mesiras nefesh. You give yourself you give up your life to the Eibishter. So here we connect the menucha of Shabbos with Kiddush Hashem. Almon Chosam, when you have the menucha, it's equivalent to something Mekadesh Hashem. Why? Because the Inyan from Mesiras Nefesh, Akidesh Hashem, gefindt sich in sein Ganzkeit bei allen Yidden beshoven. The Inyan of the ability to give your life up, which comes from the Etzem HaNefesh, weil der Keich Mesiras Nefesh, Akidesh Hashem, kommt from the Yechida Sheba Nefesh. That ability to go on Kiddush Hashem comes from the Etzem of the Nefesh. So that's the comparison, the connection between the Menucha of Shabbos with Kiddush Hashem. That through Menucha of Shabbos you accomplish what Kiddush Hashem accomplishes, because the Menucha of Shabbos comes from the etzem of the Eibishter, which is in the etzem of a Yid, and Kiddush Hashem, which is Mesiras Nefesh, is also connected to the etzem of a Yid. And the far is Va'al Menuchosam Yagdishu, that through the Menucha, through resting on Shabbos, you make a Kiddush Hashem or a Menucha Shabbos, and Kiddush Hashem is eine beide gebunden mit the Kiddush of Nefesh, because the Menucha of Shabbos and Kiddush Hashem both come from the Kiddush of Nefesh. Which is, as he said before, that's why it's the union of Shabbos is equal by everybody, because it comes from the Yechida Sheba Nefesh. It's something that comes from the Yechida of the Eibishter, the etzem of the Eibishter into the Yechida of the person, similar to Kiddush Hashem. So now we know what the union of Shabbos is and why it's by everybody equal, because it has to do with the etzem and nefesh of a Yid. Das was B'chinas Sheba Nefesh is ganz by Yedid. And we said the reason why it's by everybody, because everybody, the Yechida Sheba Nefesh, no matter what a Yid is, things could be not so good, but Yechida Sheba Nefesh is always complete. Why is it complete by every Yid? Yid can give matzah from seine keiches, regardless of what is the level of his ability, his attributes. Why is that? Is that the far, was Yechida is the gamma abgetrogen from the keiches from the mention. Because Yechida is completely removed from all other attributes of a person. She is hecher from Gilui. All attributes of a person are called Gilui. Gilui is a revelation. It's not the etzem, the nefesh itself. The ability to see, let's say, is that nefesh. From the nefesh comes a koyach, ability to speak. All the other things, the ability of seichel, the ability of midas, they're all called giluyim of the nefesh. But Yechida Sheba Nefesh is higher than these Giluyim. It's removed from these Giluyim. Das heißt, which means Yechida Sheba Nefesh is Hecher Afilu from the Prinus Makifim for the Neshama. Yechida Sheba Nefesh is beyond, much higher and removed from all attributes. And what he's adding now, even from the Makifim of the Neshama. We know that in the Neshama you have Keiches Pnimim, Keiches Makifim. Keiches Pnimim means the inner Keiches which a person uses, and then you have Keiches which are a little bit removed from the person. They're higher beyond the person. That's why they're called Makiv. Makiv means surround, just like surrounds are outside. So they surround the person, but they're not inside the person in a pneumistic way. But when we say Yechida Sheba Nefesh is removed, that's removed much more than the removal, the separation of the Makifim from the person. From mentioned. Because even the Makifim, they have a effect on the person. The Keiches Pnimim, the part that's Pnimi is that makes up the person. The Keiches Makifim is beyond, but they still have a connection to the person. We see Mavoy in Chassidus, it says in Chassidus, it's Maimer Azal, on the statement of the Chazal, the Gemara says that there was a vision that Daniel saw. And the Pasuk says that the other people that were with him did not see, they got very scared. And the Gemara asks, if they didn't see it, why did they get scared? The Gemara answers, even though they didn't see, but their mazel. So what is their mazel? Mazel means that neshama, which is on top beyond them. And we know that that part of the neshama, which is completely removed, is beyond, that's called the mazel sheba neshama. So what does it mean that they got scared because their mazel sheba neshama saw? As from Chinas Mazel Sheba Neshama, from this level of the Mazel Sheba Neshama, but also the Makif and Neshama, that's the Makif, which is beyond. To mention they cause this Mazel Sheba causes that the person, it should affect the person. That's why it says sometimes a person gets certain awakening to do tshuva out of the blue. Mela, when a guy comes to a shir and listens to Chassidus and he hears someone speaking or learns a piece of Torah, Gemara, whatever, it gets a Yisayr. Sometimes walking in the street doing nothing, all of a sudden you get a Yisayr. Where does that come from? So it says it comes from the Mazel Sheba Neshama. The Mazel Sheba Neshama sometimes is mamshich certain keiches to the person. That's the reason why it's called Mazel. Mazel comes from the word nasal, dripping. It drips from the Neshama. So the keiches that we have inside, that certainly has an effect on us. The Mazel Sheba Neshama, the Makiv, which is beyond us, is beyond Takeh, but it's still, that's why it's called Makiv, but it still has a shaykhus. That clearly fits to the word Makiv. Makiv means it surrounds you. So it's a shaykhus to you, it surrounds you. So it's not in the pnimis, but it's surrounding. Aber Yechida Sheba Nefesh is Hecher von zu haben, Agilu die gewirke Gemenschen, Yechida Sheba Nefesh, the Gilu, it doesn't have any effect on the person. These are Zet, tu is Gilu, sie hat nicht kein shaykhus. It seems as if the Yechida Sheba Nefesh is completely removed. So Begili does it does sometimes, but in the Kude Be'echlolis, the Yechida Sheba Nefesh is completely removed from the person and his keiches. And that's what he says here, that this is beyond the keiches hanefesh. The far can it zayin the ashro from Chinis Yechida in the Klei Aguf. That's why, where is the Yechida rest? It's really hard to understand what it means, but where the Yechida Sheba rests? So we know the other parts of the neshama rest in the person. We said the Makiv Sheba Neshama rests around the person, so to speak. And the Yechida cannot rest in the Klei Haguf, in the vessels of the body. Noch mer afilu nit in the Makifim Shalodam. The Yechida Sheba Nefesh, the Mittel, whatever says, cannot rest even in the Makif, the surrounding of the person. And what surrounds the person physically? Levushim abayis, the garments, the house. It says that where is the Makif in the Neshama? It's in the person, but in the thing which is outside of the person, because it's removed. What's outside of the person, but it's connected to the person? The clothes you wear. It surrounds you. It's not you, it surrounds you. Then you have we call it Makiv Akora, Makiv Arochik. The clothes is the close Makiv, and the house is Makiv Arochik. It's a far Makiv. That's why the clothes fits to the size of each person separately. While the house, you could have one big house that fits tall people, short people, etc., because it's a further Makiv. But nevertheless, they are connected to the person. A house is made with the head of the person, not to the size, but it surrounds the person. The clothes is even closer. So he says that the Yechidah Shebenefesh is not in the clothes, not in the house. Makifim are there. For Mbalzeho, Mashaychas, Nongi must mention. They're there because they have a connection, just like the clothes has a connection to the person. The house also has a connection, but they're further removed. So Ruchni is also that part of the neshama is connected to his makif, his physical makif. Everything in the physical world is a result of the spiritual thing, and then spiritually it's a makif, and there's two levels of makif. Makif arochim, makif akorev. In Ruchnius of the keiches neshama, so the gashmius is there, and he says, "Nit leis the levushim, the makif akorev." Not only the clothes, which is the makif akorev, the clothes makif. The mention von seinem zugepasst, the most von dem was drug delusion. The clothes are makiv, but they are close to the person. That's why they are fit to the specific size of the person. So not only there the yichide can be, nor bayis. Even the house was a makiv harochik. It's a far makiv. It's weit for mention. It's far. But eicher hashaychus where to mention still is a shaychus because the house is made for people, so it's makiv the people. So because they have a shaychus to the person, the gilui, they're connected, can dort mit sein die ashro from Yechide. So the resting of the Yechide Shebenefesh cannot be there, but it's moved to the Gamra for mention, because the Yechide Shebenefesh is completely removed from the person. It's his neshama, but it's completely removed. Only certain times it comes down, whatever, but b'chlal, it's removed from the person. So where is it sheira? Not in the person himself, inside, not in the makif, which is the clothes, not even in the makif arochik, which is the house, nor the ashrof when Yechide is, where does the rest, where does the Yechide rest? Like it says in the Maimah, in the Dalad Amish Odom, in the 4 Amis around the person. They're far from the person. There's nothing further. I mean, there could be further than 4 Amis, but wherever you move, you have your 4 Amis. So there's nothing more. There is a person has 4 Amis around him. And the far can dort shade is on Yechide Shebenefesh. That's why the Yechide could be, because it's far from the person. And we find by Shabbos the inyan of 4 Amis. This is the reason for what is the din from Dalad Amas in Shabbos. There's a din of 4 Amis in Shabbos. Where do we find 4 Amis? So the Rebbe says, "V'chazal learn from Posik." Chachamim learn now. The Posik says, "Shvu yishtachtov." And on Shabbos, the Torah says, "You sit by yourself where you are. Al Vayetzei ish mimkeimei. Don't walk out of your place." So what does that mean? So the Gemara says that it means a person really cannot walk out of his Dalad Amas. On Shabbos, really, you cannot walk out of your 4 Amas. So how could you walk in the city? Because the halacha is that the whole city is considered like his Dalad Amas. The whole city is like a Dalad Amas for whatever reason. But be'etzim, you cannot walk more than Dalad Amas. But in Shabbos is the Gilu from Chinis Yechide, as Ashra says in the Dalad Amas Shalom. Why is there a din of Dalad Amas in Shabbos? Because we said before that Yechide is connected to the Dalad Amas of a person. And Shabbos, Yechide shines, so to speak. That's the union of Yechide. So that's why on Shabbos we have the union of Dalad Amas. And in the order, the Rebbe even says that there is a Kasal Kadaitach in Sifri Zute that on Shabbos you're not allowed to walk physically 4 Amas. Well, Halacha is not like that, but it's all connected to Dalad Amas. Then he has another din. He says that we're not allowed to carry Dalad Amas to Shabbos. Brings in the order 33 that in Targum Yenison and Piskazut bring that Gam Tiltel Dalad Amas B'Shus Rabban Yom Misham. The fact that you're not allowed to carry more than Dalad Amas in the street on Shabbos is also learned up from the same pasuk in Kemei. So the mokim of a person that contains the person that's still considered his mokim is his Dalad Amas. We find this din of Dalad Amas of many things, but by Shabbos we find specifically the din of Dalad Amas. Why Dalad Amas in Shabbos specifically? Because since Shabbos is a Yul of the Yechide Shebenefesh, like we said before, and the Dalad Amas is sheira, the Yechide Shebenefesh is sheira in the Dalad Amas. So that's why on Shabbos there's a din of Dalad Amas. So what comes out from all this? All this comes out that the union of Shabbos is connected to Yechide Shebenefesh, which is sheira, which rests in the Dalad Amas. It's really hard to understand exactly practically how to explain it. What do we mean the neshama is in the floor next to him? Even when we say that the other keshers makifim are also in the clothes, when you're in the clothes, maybe in the ones that are in the person, no, it gives him life. There's no life in the clothes. to say that the chelik of the neshama is in the clothes, or there's certainly no life in the house, certainly no life in the dalad amis. So it's a ruchnis dikinya, but this is like, it needs to be here to understand what it means in the neshama, the yichida shebenefesh, shaded dalad amis. But one thing is clear, that the yichida shebenefesh is connected to the inyan of the dalad amis, which is something outside the person, which is represented in the dalad amis. The clothes and the house is not representing so much beyond the person, because they are still connected to the person. Still, this is made to size, but even the house is not made to size, but it's still connected to the person. It's connected to the person. So there you don't have the real disconnect to the yid. But the dalad amis shows the disconnect because it's outside of the person completely. So that could have a shaycha somehow to the yichida shebenefesh. Pikol and the Rebbe says, based on all this, he's moving the shayches from birchas ufaratzto mit mitzvah Shabbos. Now we'll understand the connection between the brocha of ufaratzto, which is a brocha b'li mitzvah. We said before, the brocha without any limits. The connection to Shabbos. The question was, why? What's in Shabbos b'li mitzvah, and what's in Shabbos without limits? That because of that you get a brocha without limits. He explains, ufaratzto is a nachla b'li mitzvah. Ufaratzto, we said, is a nachla, an inheritance without any limits, without borders, without limits. What's the real not limits? What is something that you could say has no limits? Really, does the mercha von atzmusum husi is bored of hotit kinagbolos that goes on the Eibishter himself. Now explain why. When I say something is very big, what's that very big? There's nothing that's very big. Depends. Something is 10 feet. Is that big? Yeah, compared to 1 foot, it's very big. Compared to 20 feet, it's not so big. The same thing when you have 100 feet, you have 1,000 feet. Anything that we have, since there is something bigger than it, it's not considered bleak vul. It's not considered very, very big. The only thing is something that has nothing greater than it, and that's the Eibishter. The Eibishter, the etzem of the Eibishter, has no agbolas. Atzmusay Musi Yisborach has no agbolas. That's called merchav. And it says, Nameitze karosi ko, anoni b'merchav ko, answer me b'merchav. Merchav means wide. So Chassidus says, what's that wide? Is something wide? Well, it depends. Something that's narrower than it is called wide. Something that's wider than it is not called wide. So what's the real width? The real wide means that there's nothing wider. And that's the Eibishter. As we said before, the merchav of the Eibishter, the bleak vul that's there, which is connected to Yechidah Shebenefesh, which is connected to the etzem of the Eibishter, which is bleak vul, that's on Shabbos. So keeping Shabbos. That the menucha of Shabbos comes from you, me'itcho mamish, from the Eibishter, from the etzem of the Eibishter. So where do we have a connection to the etzem of the Eibishter out of everything? In Shabbos, because Shabbos comes me'itcho from the Yechidah. And this is the Maila for Shmira Shabbos from Yankiv, for Shmira Shabbos from Avraham. This explains the Maila of keeping of Shabbos of Yaakov, the Gavish keeping Shabbos of Avraham. By Avraham is Teire Kelod and Prat from Shmira Shabbos in Kiyim from Kolos HaTeire. By Avraham, as we said before, the Teire does mention he kept Shabbos, but amongst all the mitzvahs, he kept all the mitzvahs, which include Shabbos also. But there's nothing specifically that he kept Shabbos. Weil sein Inyan is nicht given der Beweisen, the Gilui, the Maila for Shmira Shabbos, like the andere mitzvahs. His inyan was not to show the mile of Shabbos compared to other mitzvahs that's special, which means his inyan was not the Gilui P'chinas Yechida. Since we said Shabbos is the Gilui of Yechida by Avraham, we don't find a Pikabola, Pichsidus, we don't find that his thing was to be Megala the Yechida Shebenefesh. Dafke by Yaakov, specific by Yankiv. And Yankiv no Pikabola is the Kavam Tzoi. When Avraham is Chesed, Yitzchak is Gura Kav is, when Yaakov is Tiferes. Chesed is the right side, Gvura is the left side, Tiferes is the middle. It's called the Kavam Tzoi. And the mile of Kavam Tzoi is that it contains everything, because Kavam Tzoi is a mixture of the right and the left. That's the middle. That's the level of Yaakov. Yaakov is Kavam Tzoi. His Dafke Er is Elu B'Pnimis HaKeser. This is already Kabbalistic things that says that Kavam Tzoi, which is Tiferes, is connected to higher than Atzilus. In Atzilus, we have the Eser Spheres. And then you have the level of Keser, which is higher than Atzilus. Which of the Spheres really connect to Keser, to higher than Atzilus, which Keser is an expression of the Etzem of the Eibishter? That's in the middle. That's called, Chassidus brings the posik, that's the Briach HaTichain. HaMavriach HaKotzer HaKotzer, it says in the Mishkan, they had the rings, not the poles on the walls. So there were 2 poles, and then the bottom 2 poles, and in the middle was one long one that came from one end to the other. So it says the Kavam Tzoi in Kabbalah starts off on the highest level, and Kesser goes down all the way. Was by M is given the bittul betachlis, and he had the real bittul. He had the greatest bittul more than all the other two of us. But Mele, he's able to connect, and this is connected to the fact that he's the Kavam Tzoi. Where do we see he had the tachlis habittul? But the first state als agdomet to brichas of ratzah. That's why, as an introduction to the bracha of ratzah, it says, "Your children will be like the dust of the earth." Poshav Pshata means will be so many or spread out. What's offer vice of tachas habittul? Offer dust is the tachas habittul, as we find by when you destroy chometz. It says it should be bottled to afredare like offer. Offer is because you want to be mavatal the chometz, not destroy. When you mavatal the chometz, you nullify the chometz, and it's nothing. You mavatal it. It's using the word offer. So since Yaakov was kavam tzoi, and he was his level reached all the way to high. He had the bittul. But by him, Meir given b'chinas yechide. So dafke by Yaakov shine yechide was dvik zechuis begil in Shmira Shabbos. That begil in a revealed way. Where is it expressed in Shmira keeping Shabbos? Kanal Baruch, as we said before. So this answers dafke by Yaakov. We find it. We find it by Yaakov because since Shabbos is the union of Yechide Sheva Nefesh, it fits more to Yaakov. By him, there was the union of connecting to the Yechide Sheva Nefesh, because Yechide Sheva Nefesh is connected to the Etzem of the Eibishter, and by him, he had this gilui of the Etzem of the Eibishter through his bittul and through his madrege, the way it says in the Kabbalah. That's why by him, the Torah mentioned Shabbos specifically because his keeping Shabbos was Mahayim madrege. By Avraham, it didn't specifically bring out the union of Gilui HaYechide. And by Yaakov already, it brought out the union of Gilui HaYechide. And that's why his Shmira Shabbos. And now we understand why the bracha for Shmira Shabbos is a faratzta, because a faratzta, which means bli gvul, is only connected to the Eibishter, the Etzem of the Eibishter, which is connected to Yechide. So if you keep Shabbos, which is connected to Yechide, you will get the bracha, mida connected mida. You'll do the aveda of Gilui HaYechide, which is bli gvul, which is Gilui Etzem, which has no limitations. If you keep Shabbos, you're megala that. So the reward will be you'll get something with no limitations. Another thing we mentioned before is that it seems like what was special by Shabbos by Yaakov. Where do we find that he kept Shabbos differently? By the tchumin, which are the borders around the person. The tchum, so he explains why. The tchum from I mentioned is the dema to the dalad amashalei. The tchum, we say a person has a certain amount of space that's around him, that's still called his tchum, is similar to the daladamas. We say every person has daladamas. From the tchum is doch mekei mishalodom. Just like we said, daladamas is the place of the person. The tchum is also the far lengthness of posik al yetzish mekei. Where do we know that the person can't walk more than the tchum? From this posik, don't walk out of your place. So the tchum is called the mekei mishalodom. From them is vuven the gilu from yichida that shaycha to the tchum mishalodom. Just like we said before, that the Gila Yechide is in the daladamas around the person, because that's his Mekayme. Since Tchumin is also Mekayme Shalodom, so Yechide is there also. In andere Werte, in other words, Keshemvi sees Dode Hashro from Chinis Yechide in the daladamas Shalodom, just like the Yechide rests in the forearms of a person. Azay Yeshlemer B'derech Hefsher, the Rebbe says it's possible to say, Yizayich Dome Ein Zeh Yirashro, and close the Kimbokim from the Manch. In Zayin Tchum. That in detail it's in the daladamas, but more general, it's in the whole tchum, because the whole tchum is still called the place of the person. There you have the ashroa, the resting of the yechide. And therefore, as hagam the rinya from yechide, rikt zuchois in klovas dikin kiyim from the Shabbos. Even though we said that this gilui of the yechide is expressed in Shabbos, no matter which part, but in the general keeping Shabbos. But the sabar aspecielle shayches med the minya from tchumen is a special shayches of tchumen. Because dort is the ashroa from Chinis Yechide, because there specifically. So that's why Shabbos Bechlolis is the Yechide, specifically in the daladamas of the person. That's why there's a din of daladamas. More Bechlolis is Tchumin. So when the Torah wants to tell us the specialty of Shabbos by Yaakov, it tells it to us in connecting to the Tchumin. So now this answers the kasha that the Rebbe asked, why did the Gemara say that for keeping Shabbos, you get the bracha nachla b'li mitzorin, because Shabbos is b'li mitzorin. So you get the bracha of Faratzta by Yaakov, which is b'li mitzorin, and it was especially by Yaakov, and it expressed itself in the mitzvah of Tchumin, in the way he made the Tchumin, which is a place where the Ashra is of the Chidish Benefesh.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. This is a hard sikha. not hard in the words, but to grasp the tape
A
is what
tifa sicha.
yeah, right. Not hard, but it's steep. It's steep in Yonim. I do have to say the truth that from when the Sikha came out, all the years I had this hard time to grasp what does it mean that Yechide is in the Daladamas. Yechide, what mean the Yechide Sheda? It's Siddish words, Kabbalah words. Yechide Sheda in the Daladamas outside of the person. But there's so much depth here that we got to look into it. Anyway, okay. Okay, cool. So,